You are not as respected as you think you are. Not in that meeting last week. Not in that conversation you walked away from telling yourself went fine. In every one of those rooms, a decision was made about you. Silently. Within the first 30 seconds. And it had nothing to do with what you said. It had everything to do with what your body was confessing while you were saying it. The behaviors that cost you in those rooms, you were taught they were virtues. Your parents modeled them. Your teachers rewarded them. Every social environment confirmed them as signs of good character. Which means you didn't develop these habits accidentally. You were trained into them by people who had no idea what they were teaching you to broadcast. Machiavelli spent years inside the most powerful rooms in Renaissance Italy, not as a philosopher at a distance, but as a working diplomat at the table. What he documented was not what people said. It was what their bodies were doing while they said it. A gesture at the wrong moment, a silence filled with the wrong sound, a posture that shifted when the wrong person entered. He watched powerful men lose rooms not to armies, but to their own unconscious behavior. The same pattern, different faces. His conclusion: the man who does not understand what he is transmitting will spend his life wondering why he receives so little. That is what this video is about. Not theory, specific behaviors, the ones you performed today, and the exact signal each one sends the moment you walk in. There are 7. 6 are visible. The 7th is the root, the operating system that generates all 6. By the time we get there, you won't need me to tell you to change. You will have already recognized yourself. And recognition, not willpower, not effort, is the only mechanism that permanently breaks a pattern. Jung spent 40 years in clinical practice confirming exactly that. Think about the last conversation you had before you opened this video. Picture the room. Picture the other person talking. Your head was moving, not once, not at a point that earned it. Continuously. The automatic rhythmic nod that begins the second someone opens their mouth and doesn't stop until they close it. You think this signals attentiveness, respect, active listening. Watch what it actually transmits. Your body was applauding before your brain finished processing what it was hearing. You were physically broadcasting agreement before you knew what you were agreeing with. In the unconscious grammar of status, which operates faster than conscious thought, that single behavior communicates one thing with precision. This person can be talked into anything. Their approval costs nothing. Jung called it the persona reflex, the automatic social mask that activates the moment your nervous system detects someone it ranks above you. It doesn't wait for a decision. It performs submission immediately. The nod is not something your mind chose. It is your nervous system announcing a hierarchy you haven't consciously agreed to. Here is the test. Think about the last conversation you had with someone who holds genuine authority over you. Did your head move the entire time? Now think about someone who holds no authority over you at all. Did your head move the same way? It didn't. You nod upward. You hold still across. Every person in that room reads that asymmetry without knowing they're reading it. They don't think he's nodding. They feel this person is below the other, and they can't explain why. It arrived as instinct. Machiavelli observed that agreement given freely before it is earned carries no value. Agreement that must be earned is where authority lives. The person whose nod is automatic has announced that their approval costs nothing, and what costs nothing is assigned the value of nothing. Now picture the person in the same room who holds still, body performing nothing, eyes completely present. And when they nod, once, deliberately, at a point that genuinely earned it, something shifts in the room. The speaker pauses. The room recalibrates. Because that nod was a verdict, not a reflex, a choice. One deliberate nod outweighs 50 automatic ones every time. That is the silent applause. You have been giving standing ovations to mediocre performances, and they have been treating your applause as ambient noise. The second behavior lives in your voice, and it sounds to you like confidence, like engagement, like contributing. To everyone listening, it is one of the most recognizable signals of low status that exists. You fill silence. You make a point clearly, completely, and then you keep going. If that makes sense. I could be wrong about this. A small laugh released into a pause no one else found uncomfortable. You repeat the same point with different words because the silence after the first version felt like rejection. You are performing CPR on a statement that didn't need it. Jung identified the mechanism. When silence opens, your nervous system finds no dominant signal to mirror. It interprets stillness as threat, so it generates noise, to perform a certainty you don't actually feel. But every word thrown into a silence that didn't request it does one irreversible thing. It buries the point that came before it. You take something clear and bury it under qualifications no one asked for. By the time you stop, the original statement has dissolved. No one remembers the point. They remember watching the weight drain from your words in real time. Now picture the person who makes the same point and stops, sits in the silence the way someone sits in a chair they built themselves, like they already know it holds. Machiavelli noted that the men who commanded rooms spoke rarely and never repeated themselves. Rarity creates weight.
What is given constantly is valued least. That is the anxiety broadcast. Every unnecessary word after your point is a live transmission. I cannot hold space. The third behavior has been praised your entire life as a social skill. Once you see what it actually is, you will feel it the next time it happens. You laugh when nothing is funny. Not genuine laughter, the other kind. The laugh that appears too fast after a mediocre observation from someone senior. The small laugh attached to the end of something serious because delivering it straight felt risky. The giggle that softens something you actually believe, so the room accepts the belief without friction. You laugh to manage the temperature, to keep everyone comfortable, to make sure no tension forms that could be traced back to you. Jung's concept of the shadow applies here directly. The approval-seeking function lives in the shadow of almost everyone who grew up where belonging was conditional. When the ego detects rejection risk, the shadow purchases social safety in advance. The nervous laugh is that transaction. People feel the difference between a laugh that is real and one performing a function, not consciously, at the level of instinct. When they feel the performed version repeatedly, something irreversible happens. Your laughter stops carrying information. The person who laughs at everything, when something genuinely funny happens, their real reaction looks identical to every performance before it, diluted until it carries the weight of background noise. Now watch the person who doesn't laugh at the mediocre joke. Not hostile, simply neutral. I heard you without performing. I loved it. That absence lands with a weight the laugh never would have. The joke teller registers it. This response cannot be purchased cheaply. Later, when something genuine earns their laughter, the room feels it because it's rare, because it hasn't been given away 30 times before. Their laughter becomes an event. Machiavelli observed that the leader who shapes his emotional responses around the room's comfort
has handed the room authority over him. Nervous laughter doesn't just signal approval-seeking. It reveals the precise location where your need for approval lives. And what can be located can be used. 3 behaviors: the nod, the noise, the laugh. Before the next 4, a man who had every external marker of power and lost it without a single battle. Piero Soderini held the highest office in the Florentine Republic, the formal authority of the most powerful city-state in Italy. By every external measure, the most powerful man in every room. Machiavelli served under him for years, and in every negotiation, every council session, he documented the same pattern. Soderini adjusted. When allies pushed back, he softened his position, not because new information emerged, but because the discomfort made him recalibrate. He filled silences with compromises no one requested. He laughed with delegations to keep the atmosphere warm. He nodded through arguments he privately disagreed with. He calibrated his words to whoever seemed most important. He was not generating a signal. He was reflecting whatever the room appeared to want. In 1512, the Medici returned to Florence with a fraction of the force required to remove a sitting head of state. Soderini fled, without mounting a defense, because everyone in Florence had registered, not consciously, but at the level of accumulated instinct, what Machiavelli had been documenting for years. The man in the seat of power had never once broadcast the frequency of power. When someone arrived who did, the seat meant nothing. Machiavelli's conclusion, patience and accommodation at the wrong moment become indistinguishable from surrender. The room does not wait. It simply registers whether you hold your signal or not. The 4th behavior is one most people perform dozens of times a day while genuinely believing it costs them nothing. You check your phone while someone is talking to you. Not the obvious version, the subtle version. Phone face down on the table, which signals I'm managing a distraction I chose not to fully eliminate. Phone in your hand, like a held object that happens to also be a screen. Phone face up anywhere near you, where every notification has a legal claim on your peripheral attention. Here is what that broadcasts, not what you think it broadcasts. What every person in that room actually receives. Something in your pocket holds a prior claim on your presence that this human being does not fully own. Attention is the most honest currency in any social exchange. It cannot be faked at the level where status is read. Where your eyes move tells the room what you value, more precisely than anything you say. The moment your eyes go toward a screen while a person is speaking, you have ranked the screen above the human. You have demonstrated that your own focus is not entirely under your governance.
Think about the last time someone checked their phone while you were mid-sentence. You felt it immediately, not as a thought, as a physical sensation, a downgrade, a ranking. Count how many times you have produced that in someone else. The person who puts the phone completely away, not face down, gone, gives something genuinely rare in this era. The person receiving it feels it below conscious thought. They lean in. They give access to parts of the conversation the divided attention person never reaches. Undivided presence has become so scarce that the person who gives it reads as the most significant person in the room. The 5th behavior sounds like virtue the entire way through. Humility, gratitude, everything a decent person is supposed to be. It is the single most reliable way to announce your position at the bottom of any social exchange before the conversation begins. You overthank people. Not normal gratitude, the excessive version. Thank you so much for making time when the meeting benefits both of you. I really appreciate you taking this when they're being paid to be there.
Thanks so much for having me, when they invited you because they needed what you bring. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Before a substantive word has been exchanged. Research on status hierarchies shows that snap judgments about relative power form within seconds, not based on credentials or appearance, but on one signal. Who expressed more need for the interaction to go well? Asymmetrical gratitude is the clearest broadcast of that signal. The overthanker has publicly assigned themselves the bottom of the exchange before anything substantive has been spoken. Once that frame locks, once the hierarchy is established in the opening seconds, everything follows. Your ideas carry less authority. Your contributions get less weight. Machiavelli was direct. Excessive deference before anything has earned it is not humility. It is an explicit invitation to be managed. The person who needs it more always receives less. Walk in as an equal, and you get treated as one. You change your energy when someone important walks in. The posture adjustment, immediate. The vocabulary that sharpens. The voice that drops in register. The body that pulls itself together in ways it wasn't 30 seconds ago. You don't notice it happening. Every person already in the room does. They watched you switch. They now hold information you didn't intend to give them. Your composure is not yours. It depends entirely on who walks in. Jung called this the authority complex, the unconscious regression that fires when a perceived authority enters. Not a decision to perform better, a contraction back toward the version of yourself that learned approval was the primary condition of safety. Everyone already in the room just watched that happen. They now know the version they receive is not the version you bring when it counts. People do not go to bat for someone who just demonstrated they are a secondary audience. And the important person who walked in? They're in a room where every signal just reorganized, except one. The person who held still. Same posture, same tone. The important person notices instinctively because the signal that didn't move stands out with unusual force. That person reads as an equal, not because they announced it, because their body demonstrated it. Machiavelli was direct. Once anyone sees the costume change, they stop trusting any version of it. 6 behaviors, 6 signals. The nod that cost nothing and meant nothing. The silence filled with words that buried the point they were supposed to support. The laugh deployed to purchase comfort you didn't need to buy. The phone that held a prior claim on your presence. The gratitude that assigned the hierarchy before a word was spoken. The adjustment that showed everyone exactly how borrowed your composure was. All different, all costly, but not 6 different causes. 1. The 7th is not a behavior in the same sense. It is the operating system beneath all of them. And once you see it, once you understand what is generating every nod, every filled silence, every nervous laugh, the behaviors will begin to dissolve, not through effort, through understanding. You cannot suppress a behavior whose root you have not identified. The 7th behavior, the master signal. You mirror whoever holds the most power in the room. Not deliberately, not as strategy, automatically, before your conscious mind registers what is happening. You walk in with your own energy, but the moment someone with perceived higher status speaks or shifts the room, something happens you've never been able to name, but have felt your entire life. Your tone adjusts. Your pace syncs to their rhythm. Your posture echoes theirs. Your energy reshapes itself quietly, completely, without a decision, around whoever you've ranked as dominant.
You become a reflection, and you don't realize it's happening. Every behavior in this video is mirroring at a different resolution. The excessive nod is your body physically synchronizing with whoever is speaking before your mind evaluated whether the rhythm is worth synchronizing with. The filled silence is mirroring in the absence of a signal, generating noise because the dominant energy seemed to demand activity and your mirror had nothing to reflect. The nervous laugh is mirroring the emotional temperature the authority appears to want. The phone reach happens when the powerful person isn't engaging you and your mirror, finding nothing to reflect, turns to the next available signal. The overthank is mirroring the status gap, your gratitude scaling to how highly you've ranked the other person, which means it was never genuine gratitude, it was a calibrated response to perceived hierarchy. The posture adjustment is the mirror recalibrating to a more powerful source the moment it enters. Every behavior, the same mechanism, the same root. Jung described this as unconscious identification with projected authority. The psyche responding not as an equal, but as a subject, orienting around the authority figure the way a compass orients around a magnetic field. Not by choice, by structure. By the conditioning of every environment where belonging depended on correctly reading the dominant signal. You learned to mirror because mirroring kept you safe. In childhood, in school, in every environment where reading the room meant belonging and misreading it meant exclusion. But you are no longer in that environment. Machiavelli arrived at one conclusion. The prince does not tune his frequency to the court. The court tunes to him. The moment he begins adjusting to the room, his authority is already surrendered, not through defeat, but through the quiet confession that his signal was never his own. Watch any room where decisions are made. The people who sync to the dominant signal read as subordinates within seconds. Not because they lack skill, because they lack their own signal. Mirrors do not lead rooms. The person who holds their energy through the entire meeting, regardless of who enters, gets weight the others never receive. The room cannot explain why. They just know this person reads like a source rather than a surface. Here is what changes the moment you stop mirroring and start broadcasting. You walk in with your own pace. Someone senior speaks loudly. You don't accelerate. Someone powerful speaks slowly. You don't slow down to mirror the gravity. You hold your own tempo, not rigidly, not as performance, the way you move when no one is watching. And something happens in the room that you will feel before you can explain it. People begin adjusting to you, because every room is unconsciously doing one of two things, broadcasting or reflecting. When a signal is consistent, when it doesn't recalibrate around whoever just walked in, when it simply holds, the room reorganizes around it, quietly, without announcement. The person with the most consistent signal becomes the center, and everyone else orbits. But once you hear a frequency, clearly, specifically named, it cannot go back to being inaudible. The next time your head begins moving on autopilot, you will feel it. You will hold still. And in that stillness, you will feel what your attention carries when it is not performing. The next time silence opens after you've spoken, you will stay in it. Your words will gain gravity they never had when you were burying them under noise. The next time someone important enters and you feel the reflex to shift, you will hold. That stillness in a room full of people who just reorganized will be felt by the one person it matters most to reach. You will hold your own frequency. Machiavelli returned to one observation across everything he wrote. The people who hold a room never chase it. They simply occupy their space as though it was always theirs.
and the room concludes that it must be. Authority that is assumed is authority that is believed. You have been adjusting, performing, mirroring, transmitting signals you didn't know you were sending. At every table where the decision about how seriously to take you was made below the level of words. That shift has already started. Not because you decided to change, because you heard the frequency. And a frequency that has been heard cannot go back to being invisible. But here is the question I want you to sit with, because the next video goes somewhere neither Machiavelli nor Jung fully admitted. If you now understand every behavior that costs you authority, why do most people who learn this still walk into the next room and mirror anyway? Why does understanding the pattern not break it? That answer is darker than anything we covered today, and it changes everything.